Shalom, my friends. Parasha is Parashat Chaye Sarah. Parashat Chaye Sarah begins with the death of Sarah. But the first verse is telling us the years of Sarah. What is the quality of her years? But in the verse it says, Vayihu Chaye Sarah, and the life of Sarah was Me'a Shana, 100 years, Ve'esrim Shana, and 20 years, Ve'sheva Shanim, and 7 years. Shene Chaye Sarah. These were the years of Sarah. Don't you think it's a little bit longer than usual? I mean, the Torah usually does not talk in such a way. All it had to say is the life of Sarah consisted of 127 years. What's going on? 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. Rashi tells us that there is a reason. And the reason is to teach us the greatness of Sarah, our mother Sarah, the wife of Abraham. Indeed, she was 127 years old when she passed away. But when the Torah says 100 years, it makes a point. Rashi says, he brings the words of our sages, saying that when she was 100 years, she was exactly like 20 years old vis-a-vis sins. Which means, since a girl 20 years old is not punished for her sins, if she committed any sins, well, in heaven they don't punish severely a person who is that young, only from 20 and on. So Sarah, when she was 100 years old, that's a long time. A time that in which usually normal people would count their sins by the thousands, right? During all this lifetime? Of course not. But she was so pure. Sarah was so pure and so holy that she was not at all in the realm of sin at all, exactly like 20 years old girl. And then the fact that it says 20 years and 20 years, so Rashi says that she was as pure and innocent as a 7 years old girl. And that teaches us that Sarah was extraordinary in her purity, in her personality, in her innocence, or in her perfection. And then the verse concludes by saying, Shene Chaye Sarah. These were the years of Sarah. You don't have to tell me that, because you just said, and those were the years of Sarah. So why do you have to be so redundant and say again, these were the years of Sarah? So Rashi says, Kulam Shavim Letova. All the years of Sarah were equal in their goodness. That she was good all the time. She was righteous all the time. And that is something extraordinary for a person. But we know that Sarah was not just any person. From the Torah we understand that she was a prophet. In fact, our sages said that her degree or her level of prophecy was even greater than the prophecy that was invested in Abraham, our father Abraham. How do we know that? Well, let us begin first by telling you a few examples of Sarah's great personality and wonderful wife. We know, for example, the first time we heard about Sarah was last week and before, in last week's parasha, where God says to Abraham, Lech lecha, go away, me'artzecha, וממולדתך ומבית אביך. You have to leave behind your land, your birthplace, and even the house of your parents. Leave everyone behind, leave everything behind. El haaretz asher ar'eka. Go to a land that I will show you later. Now pay attention to this. How many people would comply with this order? This commandment seems to be unbelievable. How can you ask someone to leave everyone behind? What about his friends? What about his colleagues? What about his birthplace, his country? And what about his parents? To leave them just to go to a place, unknown place? And let's say, well, Abraham heard, he understood the voice of God, the will of God, that he wants him to live. Because only outside, if he stays where he is, he cannot have a son, the kind of son that he would want to have. Number two, his greatness will not come to its full paroxysm. It cannot bring itself into the greatness, the real full greatness that it has for Abraham, only if he leaves everyone behind. So that Abraham understood. What about his wife? How many wives can you find that would be willing to follow their husband to a place, an unknown place, after leaving behind everything? At least some kind of objection. We understand that. But here we understand that Abraham left with his wife, his servant, and that's all. And of course his concubine Hagar. And Sarah was childless yet. No matter how much they prayed, but until the age of 90, and Abraham until the age of 99, that's when he was given a son. And now the son has to be circumcised. Okay, all this is done together with Sarah. Yitzchak, the son, is now a little boy. The big boy was Ishmael, the first son of Abraham, the son that came from his concubine Hagar. According to the understanding of our sages, Ishmael was not so good. At least he was not the greatest influence for Yitzchak. Sarah, Yitzchak's mother, was a righteous woman with the power of prophecy. She was observing the situation and she could not take it anymore. Especially that she knew that Hagar is becoming more and more important in the house of Abraham. Came the time when she could not tolerate any more Hagar, and she chased her out. And then she gave a commandment to her husband Abraham, and she said to him, Garesh et ha'ama hazot ve'et benah. I want you to expel this servant of yours, this maid of yours, and her son, because I will not tolerate the fact that this boy, her boy, Hagar's one, will inherit with my son Yitzchak. No way. For Abraham it was an excruciating thing to ask. Ishmael is still his son, his flesh and blood. How can he chase him out to the desert in the heat? He almost objected as a husband, as a father. But God again interferes, and he says to him the following: Kol asher tomar lecha Sarah, shema' bekolah. Whatever Sarah is asking you to do, listen to her voice. Ki beitzchak yikare lecha zara. Because she was right. Only your son will inherit you, and your descendancy will come only from Yitzchak. Abraham had no choice. He expelled Hagar and her son Ishmael, We know the rest of the story. She almost passed. She almost died in the desert, in the wilderness. And then the angel came and he promised her, don't worry, Hagar. You're going to become a great nation in the world. Don't worry. Right? The nation of Ishmael. The biggest in the world. No question about it. And that's all. The end with the story with Hagar and Ishmael. Since then, it's finished. That doesn't mean Ishmael was not the son anymore of Abraham. He was his son. According to the Midrash, Abraham Avinu went looking for Ishmael for 4 years until he found out that this man now became a patriarch of the Arabs, of all the Ishmael tribes, and they were all idol worshippers. Of course, it was much before Islam. And then he came back knowing that it's over now. Ishmael is not his son, and it's finished with him. But in the meantime, what interests us is to see that God is telling Abraham, listen to the voice of Sarah. This teaches us that Sarah had a much more powerful prophecy than Abraham had. And that's all. Of course, we know some other things about Sarah. For example, when the 3 angels came at that famous day that we read about last week in Parashat Lech Lecha, when Abraham, after his circumcision, was waiting for some kind of someone in need to tell him to come into his tent, and 3 angels came, and one of the first questions that they asked, Aye Sarah ishtecha, where is your wife Sarah? Vayomer hinne ba'ohel, and Abraham said she is inside the tent. And this teaches us that she was always inside, as it should be with a majestuous girl, a woman of to whom we owe respect, is a woman who stays inside. What does it mean? That doesn't mean that she didn't go out at all. I mean, we all know what our sages said, that Abraham used to convert the men by the thousands. He converted them to the belief that there is only one God in the world. The same thing also with Sarah. She was converting the women. So apparently she probably went or she received many people in her tent and so forth. But in general, Sarah is to be found inside the tent. I mean, unless if it is extremely urgent, then she would venture outside. But usually she would be in. Okay, so we understand more or less that we are talking about a matriarch, Sarah. But now with the parasha, in this parasha Chaye Sarah, I mean the name of the whole parasha is according to her name, the life of Sarah, Chaye Sarah. And all we know now here is Vatamot Sarah bekiryat arba hi Hebron be'eretz Canaan. And Sarah died in the place that we call Kiryat Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. I mean, we didn't know much about Sarah before. To tell me now for the first time that you tell me about Sarah, you tell me that she passed away. Well, maybe that's all that is needed for a woman of great excellency like Sarah. Everything about her is hidden. The day of her death is going to show us who she is. Usually, as you know, when someone passes away, then there is an obligation to go and do the hesped, the eulogy. What do you do in the eulogy? You talk about his good points, right? Normally, there is a statement that is in fact the title of 2 parashiot in the book of Vaikra, Acharemot Kedoshim. After death, then everyone is holy. It has some kind of logic, and the logic is that what happens is that when someone passes away, we don't think about his bad points, his bad character. We are going to say only good things about him. Otherwise, it's preferable to keep quiet. But there is an obligation to say the eulogy. But there is also a logical explanation here. The logical explanation is, after a person dies, automatically all the partitions that usually separate us, between us and our fellow man, disappear. Well, let me make myself clearer. When people are alive, so usually there are people that you like, despite the fact that you know their bad points. Now, many times it happens that you want to praise them. So you would say he's such a good man and he's good and that and that. Unfortunately, he has this bad trait of character and so forth. You fall immediately into the trap of Lashon Hara. But that's because of the partition that exists according to nature and according to the evil inclination, that we always have a partition, a spiritual partition that we call jealousy or haughtiness. We want to be higher than somebody else, or we are jealous of him, and so forth. It's very bad. And one has to overcome that kind of thing. But that's nature. When a person passes away, automatically those partitions disappear. I mean, you want to be jealous from whom? From someone who died. You want to be conceited against whom? Someone who died. So automatically, many of the bad things that we all possess disappear. All that's left is something good to say. And that's, grosso modo, the subject of eulogies. When it came to Sarah, it's something else. We know that Sarah, how did she die? According to the Midrash, Avraham Avinu he took his son Yitzchak, according to the commandment that God gave him, to bring Yitzchak to the mountain of Moriah and to slaughter him, to sacrifice him. That's called Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Yitzchak. When he took him, it's a long way to the mountain of the Moriah. Took them 3 days. All ready to do what God is asking. But in the meantime, Sarah stays behind. And who's coming to her? Our sages said, the evil inclination, Yetzer Hara, or Satan himself. He came in the form of a normal human being, and he says to her, Sarah, did you hear? Abraham went with his son, and now Yitzchak is dead. When she heard that, she immediately fell dead. She died. We all know the story of the binding of Yitzchak. Before he got to slaughter his son, the angel appeared to him and he says, stop, Abraham, you have reached the highest perfection. Now I know that you are totally with me, willing to listen to me whatever I ask you. You don't have to kill your son. Go back home. In the meantime, there was a ram that appeared and he was slaughtered instead of Yitzchak. Coming back, Abraham has succeeded in all the 10 tests that befell him, the poor guy. The kind of test that no one was able to accomplish successfully, impossible. But Abraham did it. When he came back home, he sees his wife, beloved wife, dead. The least you would expect from a human being is to scream with anger to God. After I have done everything that you asked me, now he has to find his wife dead. Instead, Abraham did not say a word. All it says here, Vayavo Abraham lispod leSarah velivkota. And Abraham came willing to first give her the eulogy and then to cry for her. Now there are two observations here. Number one, the verse says he came to give the eulogy and then to cry. Usually it's the other way. First you cry, because crying is the answer to your feelings for the sadness that you have gotten by losing your wife. Right? Instead, the verse is telling me that first he went to eulogize her, and then after to cry for her. But the second observation is that if you look into the Hebrew words, as written in the Torah, velivkota, to cry for her, the kaf is very small. unusual. Why is that? Our sages said because he didn't cry too much, just a little. Does that mean that he didn't care for her? Of course we know that his life was Sarah. But he knows also that this is the will of God. He knows that first his obligation. The obligation is now to make the eulogy. After that to cry a little, but not too much, to show that this is the will of God. He does not dispute the will of God, and that's it. And Abraham went to buy a land, a cemetery where to bury Sarah, even though it cost him, by the way, that's the cemetery, the land that belonged to Ephron, and Ephron was an expert in succeeding to take so much money, a million times more than it's worth, the money that belonged to Abraham. 400 shekel kesef, our sages said, it's an astronomical amount of money that Abraham was willing to pay in order to bury Sarah. And she is buried in Me'arat Machpelah. That's where the forefathers were buried, as well as Adam Arishon, Adam, the first one. All this comes to teach us. Why is it that we have to know the story of Abraham and Sarah? Well, it comes to teach us what every human being and a fellow Jew, what he should try to become. We have the greatest example, the example of Abraham. Number one, Abraham spread the belief in one God in the world, in a world that was immersed in idol worshippers. So many kinds of gods were everywhere in the land, and only Abraham, at the risk of his own life, was spreading the idea that there is only one God, one creator of the world. Sarah was there at his side to help him spreading that. And that's how they begot Yitzchak. Yitzchak was also extraordinary in his deeds, and also by spreading, also adding to what his father did, spreading the knowledge that there is only one God to the universe. Yaakov, the grandson of Abraham, is also the same, and that's the reason why every day we recite 3 times a day in the prayer, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. The God of Abraham, the God of Yitzchak, the God of Yaakov. That does not mean that there is a God for each one of them. It's only one God. But each one of them contributed so much to that knowledge, to spread that there is only one God that created the world, that's the reason why the name of God is now attributed to each one of them. Because those 3 people, our 3 great forefathers, were the ones to whom we owe very much that knowledge, which is so important. We learn from Abraham, for example, the loyalty to God. We learn from Abraham the tremendous courage to fulfill the commandment of God. We learn from Abraham the tremendous will to do things that are beyond logic, beyond whatever any human being can do. We also learn the commitment to God's commandments, such as circumcision and other things, so many other things. Same thing also with Sarah. Why do we have to learn about Sarah and her life? Because we have to learn to be like, at least a little bit like these great people. And if you might ask, how can I reach that? So the answer is, Abraham and Sarah did it. You have to try to do it also. And that's the message. Very, very great message. Not very easy, but at least it shows the capabilities of every human being. If one says, I cannot, it's only because he did not try hard enough. Why? Because there is another human being who did it. Abraham did it, Yitzchak did it, and Yaakov did it. Same thing also with our foremothers. Let me conclude by saying, may the memory of Sarah and Abraham be a blessing upon all of us, As in the parasha we read, Avraham zaken baba yamim, v'Adonai berach et Avraham bakol. God blessed Abraham with everything. Same thing also, we wish everyone that God should bless the Jewish people. Right now, at this very minute, we are finding ourselves in the land of Israel, surrounded with enemies and attacked by Gaza, by the army of the Jihad army and the Hamas army. And there is going on, what goes on now is a real war. Let's hope it will not endure that long, and we will find ourselves again with another step towards the coming redemption of the Jewish people. Amen.